to me, it was an enormous honor to be able to go to Hiroshima and to Nagasaki for the 80th commemoration of the explosion of those nuclear weapons. I have been involved in the campaign for nuclear disarmament and the peace movement ever since I was a teenager in school. And I obviously experienced many emotions and many events about peace all around the world. Nothing prepared me for the emotion of being in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, listening to the elders who had suffered and discussing with them and with many others the prospects for real peace around the world. And I was impressed that now 2 million people a year are visiting the Hiroshima Museum, the Museum of the Bomb, and what went on there. So I think well done all those that organised that event, and well done the message that has to be there. It wasn't just the 300,000 who died within a few days of the explosions. It was the 1.5 million that died afterwards, which you quite rightly drew attention to. Those that died in nuclear testing in the Pacific, in Central Asia, in Russia, in the United States, and in Australia, and those that died from nuclear testing as well. But also those that were grotesquely exploited to mine uranium, which was used to be processed in order to make the first nuclear weapons in 1945. And then when you tell people about 1.5 million who died as a result of those explosions going forward over the next couple of decades, you begin to see the horror show that's involved. And so the peace movement around the world has always been a peace movement to get rid of nuclear weapons, obviously supported the principles behind the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But as you quite rightly pointed out, there's a fundamental flaw in the treaty in that it gives protection of a sort to the declared nuclear weapon states at the expense of all the others. None of them have fulfilled their obligations to take steps towards disarmament, apart from a brief period in the 1990s. And we're now in a situation where all of the major nuclear powers in the world, without exception, are developing a new generation of nuclear weapons and a new generation of delivery systems. And so that has to be the focus of our opposition. The nuclear ban movement is incredible. It gets hardly any publicity or discussion in the mainstream media in Western Europe or the United States, but in reality, almost half of the nations who are members of the United Nations, and that's pretty well everybody, have already signed it, and 70 have already ratified it. And so it is important that we mobilize all around the world for a nuclear ban movement. People say to me, it's impossible. How can you ban nuclear weapons? I said, if you can ban chemical weapons, if you can ban landmines, then you can ban nuclear weapons as well, who are grotesquely more dangerous than either of those other two horrible weapons that are in use. And so we have to up the strength of that, and a big movement to get huge delegations to New York for the NPT review treaty next year, and fold it in to the nuclear ban movement and what goes with it as well. And so we need to be there in numbers in New York next year. But we also need to be a voice for peace in all the other conflicts, because you can see how they can descend into a nuclear conflict. I've just been rereading how the First World War broke out, from the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo by a series of secret interlocking mutual defense agreements. Within a few weeks, the world was at war and millions died on the Western Front in Europe, and it sucked in soldiers from the colonies of Britain, of France, of Germany, and Russia, all who died in that terrible conflict. And you could see how the war that's now going on in Ukraine could easily descend into that. You've got nuclear armed Russia, and you've got a huge ability of nuclear weapons from the NATO states that are supporting Ukraine. I do not support anyone invading anybody else's country and occupying them. So I do not support the Russian intervention there, as I should imagine nobody else on this call does. But there has to be a process. There has to be a ceasefire. There has to be a way forward on that. And we should use everything we can to support those nations like President Lula in Brazil, like the African Union, like the late Pope, trying to get a ceasefire. The conflict that is occupying the minds of so many people now, quite rightly, is the horror show of Gaza, where we're watching live television in real time, people being starved to death. I got a message this morning from my good friend Mustafa Barghouti, who listed another 300 people that have died from starvation in Gaza. There's no shortage of food, there's no shortage of water, there's no shortage of power, except none of it is allowed to enter Gaza. None of it is allowed to feed or sustain Palestinians. And so the international global campaign of solidarity with the Palestinians, of ending the expansionism of Israel to take over Gaza, the West Bank, and the Jordan Valley, has to be stronger, bigger, and more universal. Just remember, Israel does have nuclear weapons. We only know about that because of the bravery of Mordechai Vanunu, who suffered many years imprisonment in solitary confinement for telling the world the truth about Israel's nuclear weapons. The world is spending $2.4 trillion a year now on weapons, including weapons of mass destruction. In our country, we've been told that we have to cut expenditure on disability benefits in order to pay for an increase in arms expenditure. That is monstrous. That is simply wrong. The history of the 21st century is going to be written in brutal terms about the political leaders that fail to do anything. We've got the opportunity to turn it round. We've got the opportunity on the impetus that we got from what was going on, those wonderful people that came to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we've got the wonderful opportunity of influencing and exciting and mobilizing young people all over the world. We want to give to them a world of peace, a world free of nuclear weapons, a world free of war, when their wonderful imagination and their skills can protect and defend and improve our environment and reduce the levels of global human inequality and stop the destruction of the natural world. That's what our cause is about. That's what peace is about. That's what solidarity is about. Thank you to the people of Japan for all the horror they went through in 1945, which was actually the first weapon of the Cold War, not the last weapon of the Second World War, and to try to bring about a world of peace. Do you know what? We can do it.